In the depths of space, where civilizations rise and fall like distant stars, there exists a truth that even the most advanced species dare not speak aloud. Humans are not what they seem to be. For 3 centuries, the Galactic Council believed they had cataloged every weapon, every technology, every military capability that the young human species possessed. They were wrong. What they discovered in the dying moments of the Zephyrian War would shake the foundations of galactic civilization forever. The humans have been holding back. Not just a little. They have been playing a game so sophisticated, so terrifyingly patient, that when the truth finally emerged, entire star systems would surrender without firing a single shot. This is the story of how humanity revealed its true nature, and why the galaxy has never been the same since. The bridge of the dreadnought Eternal Vigilance shuddered as another Zephyrian plasma barrage struck their weakening shields. Admiral Sarah Chun gripped the armrest of her command chair, watching the tactical display with grim determination. Red warning lights bathed the bridge in an ominous glow as damage reports streamed in from across the human defense fleet. Shield strength down to 37%, reported Lieutenant Commander James Park from the tactical station. His voice remained steady despite the chaos erupting around them. The Defiant and Resolute are requesting immediate assistance. Their main engines are offline. Chen's jaw tightened. The Zephyrian hegemony had committed everything to this final assault on the Terran colonies in the Proxima Sector. 300 warships, each one larger and more advanced than anything in a human fleet, now bore down on the last line of defense, protecting 2 million civilian lives. Status report from all sectors, Chen commanded, her voice cutting through the bridge noise with practiced authority. Sector 7 is completely overrun, called out Commander Maria Santos from communications. The defense platforms are gone. Captain Rodriguez reports the Thunder is taking heavy casualties. The holographic display in the center of the bridge painted a devastating picture. Human forces, represented by blue dots, were vastly outnumbered by the red swarm of Zephyrian vessels. The aliens had learned from their previous encounters with humanity. No longer did they engage in the honorable single combat their species preferred. Instead, they had adopted human tactics, overwhelming force, coordinated strikes, and ruthless efficiency. "Ma'am," Park said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried across the bridge. "We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. Eyes-only classification." Chun felt a chill run down her spine. In 30 years of military service, she had never received an eyes-only transmission during active combat. "Put it through to my ready room." "Commander Santos, you have the bridge." The ready room adjacent to the bridge felt impossibly quiet after the chaos outside. Chun activated the secure communications system and watched as the holographic image of Fleet Admiral Harrison Wright materialized before her. The old man's face was grave, more serious than she had ever seen him. "Sarah," Wright began without preamble, "what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. What you do with this information will determine not just the fate of the Proxima colonies, but potentially the future of human space." Chun leaned forward. "Sir, the Zephyrians have us outgunned and outmanned. Based on current projections, you have maybe 6 hours before they break through your lines completely." Wright paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "There is another option. I am listening." Wright's image flickered as another explosion rocked the ship. 3 centuries ago, when humanity first developed faster-than-light travel, we encountered something in deep space. Something that changed our understanding of what it means to be human. The discovery was classified at levels that most government officials don't even know exist. "What kind of discovery?" We learn that humans are not native to Earth. The words hung in the air like a physical weight. We are the descendants of an ancient civilization that seeded multiple worlds across the galaxy. But more than that, we discovered why our ancestors scattered themselves across the stars. Chun felt the ground shifting beneath her feet, metaphorically speaking. Everything she had believed about human history, about their place in the universe, was crumbling. Why? Because they were the most feared military force the galaxy had ever known. They didn't scatter by choice. They were forced to hide, to suppress their true nature, because their very existence threatened the stability of galactic civilization. Another massive impact shook the ship, and Chun could hear shouting from the bridge. Time was running out. Wright continued, his voice urgent now. Your ship, Sarah, the Eternal Vigilance. It's not just a dreadnought. It's built around technology that we've kept hidden for 3 centuries. Technology that could end this war in minutes. What are you talking about? Every major human warship has a dormant system buried deep in its core. We call it the Awakening Protocol. It can only be activated by a command-level officer in a situation where human civilization faces extinction-level threats. Chen's mind raced. What does it do? It reconnects us to what we truly are. It awakens the military capabilities that our ancestors possessed, capabilities that allowed a single human fleet to subjugate entire star systems. Wright's expression darkened. But, Sarah, once you activate it, there's no going back. The galaxy will know what humanity really is. The careful diplomatic relationships we've built, the image of us as a young, relatively peaceful species, all of that ends. The bridge communicator crackled to life. Admiral, we need you out here now. The Zephyrians are breaking through Sector 4. Chen looked at the holographic image of Wright. How do I activate it? Voice authorization. Chun, Sarah, Admiral, authorization code Phoenix 77 Alpha. Then, say humanity awakens. Wright leaned closer to the camera. Sarah, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about advanced weapons or better shields. The Awakening Protocol will change every human in your fleet. It will unlock genetic programming that's been dormant for centuries. You won't just have better technology. You'll become something more than what you are now. More how? Faster reflexes, enhanced cognitive abilities, perfect tactical awareness, emotional control under extreme stress. And that's just the beginning. Wright paused. Our ancestors weren't just soldiers, Sarah. They were the perfect soldiers. Another explosion, closer this time. Chen could smell smoke seeping in from the ventilation system. The choice is yours, Wright said. Fight and die as we are, or reveal what we've always been and live with the consequences. Chen straightened her uniform and looked directly at Wright's image. Will it save the colonies? It will save far more than that. Chen nodded grimly and headed back to the bridge. The scene that greeted her was one of barely controlled chaos. Half the tactical displays were dark. Emergency lighting cast everything in a hellish red glow, and the sound of hull breaches echoed through the ship's corridors. Report, she barked. We've lost the Thunder, Defiant, and New Horizon, Santos called out. The Zephyrians are beginning their final approach to the colony worlds. Estimated time to orbital bombardment. 4 hours. Chun walked to the center of the bridge and looked around at her crew. These men and women had served with distinction, had followed her into impossible situations, had never once questioned her judgment. Now she was about to ask them to trust her with something that would change everything they thought they knew about themselves. All hands, this is Admiral Chun, she announced shipwide. I'm about to give you an order that may seem impossible to understand. In the next few minutes, everything you think you know about humanity, about yourselves, about our place in this galaxy is going to change. She took a deep breath. The weight of 3 centuries of hidden history pressed down on her shoulders. Computer, voice authorization. Chun, Sarah, Admiral, authorization code Phoenix 77 Alpha. Authorization confirmed. The ship's AI responded, awaiting final command. Chun looked out at the view screen, where the massive Zephyrian fleet was moving inexorably toward the colony worlds. 2 million civilians, depending on her decision. The future of human space hanging in the balance. Humanity awakens. The ship went completely silent. Every system, every light, every sound ceased for exactly 3.7 seconds. Then, deep in the bowels of the eternal vigilance, something that had slept for 300 years began to stir. The first thing Chin noticed was the change in her own perception. The bridge seemed brighter, more detailed. She could hear individual conversations from across the vast space, could sense the heartbeats of her crew, could feel the electromagnetic signatures of every system on the ship. Her mind processed tactical information with crystalline clarity, seeing patterns and possibilities that had been invisible moments before. Around her, the crew was experiencing similar transformations. Lieutenant Commander Park stood straighter, his eyes now holding a predatory gleam as he absorbed tactical data at an impossible rate. Commander Santos moved with fluid grace, her hands dancing across control surfaces with inhuman precision. But it was the ship itself that underwent the most dramatic change. Hull, plating shifted and reconfigured, revealing weapon systems that had never appeared on any schematic. The bridge expanded as dormant sections activated, providing access to capabilities that redefined what it meant to be a warship. "My God," Park whispered, staring at his tactical display. "Admiral, I'm reading weapon systems I don't even have names for." Chun smiled, and there was something terrifyingly cold in that expression. She understood now why their ancestors had been forced to hide. The knowledge flowing through her mind, the tactical awareness, the absolute certainty of victory. It was intoxicating and terrible. "Open a channel to the Zephyrian fleet," she commanded. Her voice was different now, carrying an authority that seemed to resonate at a cellular level. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the Zephyrian flagship. Fleet Commander Vexthara stood before her camera, his reptilian features twisted in anticipated triumph. The Zephyrian was massive, nearly 8 feet tall, with scales that gleamed like polished metal and eyes that burned with cold intelligence. "Admiral Chun," Vexthara hissed, his translator rendering his words with mechanical precision. "I am surprised you would contact us now. Are you perhaps ready to surrender and spare your colonies the coming fire?" Chun studied the alien commander with her enhanced perception. She could read micro-expressions in his alien features, could detect stress patterns in his voice, could see the confidence radiating from every gesture. In her enhanced state, Vexthara was as transparent as clear water. "No, Fleet Commander," she replied calmly. "I'm contacting you to offer you the same choice you just offered me." Vexthara's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "Surrender now, and I'll allow your fleet to withdraw to Zephyrian space. Continue your attack, and I will demonstrate why humanity was once the most feared force in this galaxy." The Zephyrian commander threw back his massive head and laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "You have 43 ships remaining, Admiral. I have 287. Your hull is breached in 16 locations, and your shields are failing. What exactly do you think you can do?" Chin's smile widened, and Every human on every ship in the fleet felt it in their bones, a predatory satisfaction that spoke to something ancient and terrible in their genetic memory. "Fleet Commander," she said softly, 300 years ago, a single human dreadnought pacified an entire star system in 18 minutes. Today, you're about to learn why." She gestured to Park, who had been waiting for her signal with the patience of a born predator. "All ships, this is eternal vigilance. Weapons free. Show them what we really are." The transformation of a human defense fleet was unlike anything the Zephyrian sensors had ever recorded. What had moments before been a ragtag collection of damaged warships suddenly began to emit energy signatures that defied conventional physics. The very space around the human vessels seemed to shimmer and bend as systems that had lain dormant for centuries roared to life. Fleet Commander Vexteros stared at his tactical display in growing confusion. Science Leader Korth explained these readings. "The human ships appeared to be changing." Science Leader Korth, a smaller Zephyrian whose scales had faded to a dull gray with age, hunched over his instruments with growing alarm. "Fleet Commander, I am detecting massive energy buildups across the human fleet. Power signatures are increasing exponentially. But these readings, they make no sense. Elaborate. The energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases. It's as if their ships are drawing power from space itself." Vexteros' vertical pupils contracted to thin slits. In his 50 years of military service, he had never encountered technology that could manipulate zero-point energy fields. Such capabilities were theoretical even for the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Aboard the Eternal Vigilance, Admiral Chun felt the ship's awakening as if it were her own. The neural interface that had activated along with the ancient systems allowed her to perceive the vessel not as a tool, but as an extension of her own body. She could feel every weapon charging, every shield generator spinning up to impossible output levels, every sensor array expanding its range to encompass entire solar systems. "Admiral," Park reported, his voice filled with awe, "the tactical systems are showing us targets I didn't even know existed. I can track individual Zephyrian crew members through their hull plating." Chun nodded. The enhanced tactical awareness was almost overwhelming. She could see the battle unfolding across 4 dimensions, could predict enemy movements with mathematical precision, could identify structural weaknesses in Zephyrian ships that their own engineers probably didn't know existed. Weapons status? All primary systems online and charged beyond maximum rated capacity, Park replied. "Admiral, some of these weapons don't exist in any human technical manual. The targeting systems are offering options I've never heard of: molecular disruption fields, temporal displacement cannons, gravitational implosion torpedoes." Commander Santos looked up from her station. "Admiral, I'm receiving surrender requests from 14 Zephyrian vessels. They're detecting the same energy buildups their flagship is seeing." Chun considered this. The ancient tactical programs flowing through her enhanced consciousness suggested multiple approaches to the situation. She could demonstrate mercy and potentially end the conflict with minimal bloodshed, or she could make an example that would ensure humanity was never challenged again. The cold logic of her awakened mind calculated the long-term strategic implications of both choices. "Denied," she said finally. Fleet Commander Vextera made his choice. Now he gets to see the consequences. She turned to Park. "Target their flagship with a Level 1 demonstration." Park's enhanced reflexes allowed him to interface with the weapons systems at the speed of thought. "Level 1. Admiral, are you sure? The power requirements alone could do it." The Eternal Vigilance rotated with impossible grace for such a massive vessel. Where before it had moved like the lumbering dreadnought it appeared to be, it now positioned itself with the fluid precision of a dancer. The main batteries, which had previously fired conventional energy bolts, now began to charge with power drawn from the quantum foam itself. Firing solution locked, Park announced. All ships report ready for coordinated strike. Chun felt a moment of hesitation, not her own, but an echo from her non-enhanced consciousness. The person she had been 10 minutes ago would have been horrified by what she was about to do. But that person had been playing with incomplete information. That person hadn't understood what humanity truly was, or what was necessary to ensure their survival in a hostile galaxy. Fire. The weapons that struck the Zephyrian flagship were not energy beams or projectiles in any conventional sense. They were focused distortions in reality itself, tearing holes in space-time that allowed the ship's own mass to be used against it. The effect was instantaneous and horrifying. The massive Zephyrian dreadnought, over 2 kilometers of hardened battle steel, simply folded in on itself. Not crushed, not destroyed by explosion, but literally compressed into a sphere roughly the size of shuttlecraft. The sphere hung in space for exactly 2.3 seconds before the gravitational distortion collapsed and scattered the compressed matter across several light years. The silence on the Zephyrian fleet's communication channels was absolute. Chun opened a fleet-wide channel to the remaining Zephyrian ships. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that bypassed conscious thought and spoke directly to the primal fear centers of every sentient brain that heard it. I am Admiral Sarah Chun of the Human Defense Fleet. 3 minutes ago, you outnumbered us 7-1. You possess superior firepower, better armor, more advanced shields. By every conventional measure, you should have achieved total victory. She paused, allowing the implications to sink in. But conventional measures don't apply to humanity. We are not the young, peaceful species you believed us to be. We are the descendants of the Void Walkers, the civilization that once ruled 3/4 of this galaxy. We have been hiding our true nature for 3 centuries, living quietly among the younger species, hoping never to have to reveal what we really are. On the bridge of the Zephyrian cruiser Talon's Edge, Captain Zexmar watched his tactical display with growing horror. The human fleet, which had been barely holding together moments before, now showed power readings that exceeded theoretical maximums for their ship classes. Worse, his sensors were detecting spatial distortions around each human vessel, distortions that suggested technology beyond anything his civilization had imagined possible. "Captain," his science officer whispered, "the spatial distortions around the human ships, they're not using conventional FTL drives. They're creating localized wormholes. They could be anywhere in the system in seconds." Chun continued her broadcast. "You came here to destroy human colonies and claim human worlds. You believed us weak because we negotiated instead of conquering, because we sought peaceful solutions instead of crushing our enemies. You mistook restraint for weakness." The remaining human ships began to move, and their movement defied everything the Zephyrians understood about space combat. Instead of following ballistic trajectories, they slipped through folded space, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. Each time they emerged from their quantum jumps, they were in perfect position to target Zephyrian weak points. "We allowed you to believe we were inferior because it was easier than the alternative. It was easier than watching every other species in the galaxy unite against us in fear. It was easier than returning to the dark days when the mere mention of humanity sent civilizations fleeing to the galactic rim." Fleet Commander Yextara the Blood Moon tried to coordinate a response to the human tactics, but it was like trying to fight shadows. His ship's targeting computers couldn't lock onto vessels that existed in normal space for only fractions of a second at a time. When they did achieve target lock, the human ships would phase partially out of reality, allowing Zephyrian weapons fire to pass harmlessly through empty space. But you have forced our hand, Chen continued. You threatened human civilians. You came to our worlds not as conquerors seeking territory, but as exterminators seeking to erase us entirely. You made this choice. The human fleet began its attack in earnest. But calling it an attack was like calling a hurricane a strong breeze. The weapons they deployed were beyond the Zephyrian understanding of warfare. Ships simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, but translated out of normal space-time. Others found their crews in perfect health, but their ship's systems completely dead. Electronics functioning normally, but refusing to respond to Zephyrian input, as if the ships themselves had switched sides. Captain Mercala of the Stellar Pride watched in fascination and terror as her sister ship, the Void Hunter, was struck by what appeared to be a beam of pure darkness. The beam passed through the ship's shields without resistance, through the hull without causing damage, and into the ship itself. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, every Zephyrian aboard the Void Hunter simply stopped. Medical teams to the Void Hunter, Mercala ordered. Determine the status of the crew. The response came back within minutes, and Mercala's blood chilled. Captain, the crew is alive and healthy. All biological functions are normal, but they're completely unresponsive. It's as if they've been placed in some kind of suspension. The ship's systems are functional, but they won't respond to Zephyrian commands. Chen's voice continued to echo across the battlefield. This is what we are when we stop pretending to be something else. This is why our ancestors scattered to the far corners of the galaxy. Not because they were refugees, but because their very existence destabilized galactic civilization. Admiral Chun felt the battle lust of her ancestors singing in her enhanced consciousness. The tactical scenarios flowing through her mind showed hundreds of ways to end this engagement, each more devastating than the last. She could feel the approval of her crew, their own awakened instincts resonating with the ancient patterns of dominance and control. But she also felt something else. A small, persistent voice that sounded like her old, unenhanced self. A voice that whispered about mercy, about proportional response, about the difference between strength and cruelty. Chun had to make a choice that would define not just this battle, but humanity's future relationship with every other species in the galaxy. However, she continued, we are not the same civilization that our ancestors were. We have learned from 3 centuries of peaceful coexistence. We have grown beyond the need for conquest and domination. She gestured to Park, who immediately understood and began implementing new targeting parameters. You came here to destroy 2 million human civilians. I could erase your entire fleet in the next 30 seconds. Instead, I'm going to give you a choice your ancestors never received from ours. Leave now, return to Zephyrian space, and spread word of what you have seen here. Tell the galaxy that humanity is no longer hiding, but that we choose to use our power responsibly. The human ships began to withdraw, pulling back from the Zephyrian positions, but maintaining their impossible defensive formations. The message was clear. They could have pressed their attack, but chose not to. If you attempt to attack human colonies again, if you threaten human civilians, if you mistake our restraint for weakness a second time, I will demonstrate capabilities that will make what you've witnessed today seem gentle by comparison. Fleet Commander Vexthera, now commanding the Zephyrian fleet from the bridge of the Eternal Fong after the destruction of his flagship, stared at the tactical display showing the human fleet's withdrawal. His military training warred with the primal terror that gripped his heart. The humans could have wiped out his entire force. The technology they had displayed was so far beyond Zephyrian capabilities that resistance would have been meaningless. Yet they had chosen mercy. Fleet Commander, his communications officer, called out, "We're receiving formal withdrawal orders from the human admiral. She's offering safe passage to the edge of the system." Vexteraz's vertical pupils dilated as he processed this information. In Zephyrian military culture, showing mercy to a defeated enemy was seen as a sign of weakness. But the humans had demonstrated overwhelming superiority before offering terms. This wasn't weakness. It was the confidence of a predator that knew it could strike at any time. "All ships," he ordered, his voice heavy with the weight of defeat, "begin withdrawal to the system's edge. Maintain formation and prepare for emergency jump to home space." As the Zephyrian fleet began its retreat, Chen felt the ancient battle programming gradually fade from her consciousness. The enhanced reflexes and tactical awareness remained, but the cold hunger for dominance that had characterized her ancestors slowly ebbed away. She was still more than she had been an hour ago, but she was also still recognizably human. "Admiral," Santos reported, "the Zephyrian fleet has cleared the system. Long-range sensors show them jumping to FTL. They're heading home." Chen nodded and settled back into her command chair. The crisis was over, but she knew that this was only the beginning. Word of what had happened here would spread throughout the galaxy. Every species would have to recalibrate their understanding of humanity's place in galactic civilization. "Open a channel to Earth Command," she ordered. "Priority Alpha encryption." Fleet Admiral Wright's image appeared on her screen, and she could see both relief and concern in his weathered features. "Sarah, we monitored the engagement through the quantum entanglement communications array. How do you feel?" Chen considered the question. How did she feel? The enhancement was permanent. She could sense that much. She would never again be the person she had been before the awakening. None of them would. "Different," she said finally. "More capable, but also more aware of the responsibility that capability brings." She looked out at the view screen, where the distant glow of the Proxima colonies marked the 2 million lives that had been saved. "The colonies are secure, Admiral, but I think we need to have a very long conversation about what comes next." Wright nodded gravely. "Indeed we do. Sarah, what you've done today has changed everything. Every human fleet commander is going to want to know about the Awakening Protocol. Every government is going to demand explanations, and every alien species in the galaxy is going to be recalculating their relationship with us." Chen understood. They had crossed a line today, revealed a truth that couldn't be hidden again. Humanity was no longer just another member species in the galactic community. They were something else entirely, something that would inspire either respect or fear, but never again dismissal. "What are your orders, sir?" Wright smiled, but there was worry in his eyes. "Come home, Sarah. We have a lot of planning to do." The news of the Zephyrian defeat spread across the galaxy faster than light itself, carried by quantum-entangled communication networks that connected every major civilization. Within hours, species that had never heard of the Proxima engagement were downloading and analyzing sensor recordings that defied their understanding of physics. On the crystalline world of Arcturus Prime, High Counselor Volterra of the Sylvari Collective studied the tactical data with her 11 eyes focused to their maximum clarity. The Sylvari were considered among the most advanced technological civilizations in the galaxy, masters of energy manipulation and quantum mechanics. Yet what the humans had demonstrated made their greatest achievements seem primitive by comparison. Analysis, she requested, her telepathic voice rippling through the crystal chamber where her science advisors waited. Senior researcher HFY projected his findings into the shared consciousness space. High Counselor, if these readings are accurate, and we verified them through 17 independent sources, then human technology operates on principles we haven't even theorized. They appear to manipulate space-time itself as easily as we manipulate electromagnetic fields. Velterra's crystalline skin flickered through several colors, indicating deep thought. What does this mean for our expansion plans in the Outer Rim? All human-claimed systems should be considered absolutely inviolate. KYTH responded immediately. Any aggressive action toward human interests would likely result in the complete destruction of our forces before we could even register their presence. Meanwhile, in the vast underwater cities of Oceanus, the aquatic Deep Song civilization held emergency sessions that resonated through their planet's ocean floors. The Deep Song communicated through complex sonic patterns that could travel across entire continents. And now those songs carried undertones of fear that hadn't been heard in centuries. Songkeeper Mordulak, whose ancient voice carried the wisdom of 700 years, addressed the assembled leaders with harmonics that spoke of fundamental change. The surface dwellers of the dry world Terra have revealed themselves to be more than we understood. The songs speak of ships that move through folded space, of weapons that erase matter from existence itself. Echo singer Velnara, younger but respected for her prophetic abilities, added her voice to the harmony. The old songs, the deep memory songs from before the Great Silence, they speak of the Void Walkers, the destroyers who came from the dark between stars. Could these humans be their descendants? The question sent ripples of unease through the assembled Deep Song leaders. The deep memory songs were ancient, passed down through acoustic tradition for millennia. They spoke of a time when a terrible civilization had swept through the galaxy, subjugating entire star systems before mysteriously vanishing. Most species had dismissed these as mythology. Now, as they analyzed the recordings from Proxima, the Deep Song began to wonder if their oldest songs were actually historical records. Back on Earth, in the secure briefing rooms beneath the headquarters of the Terran Defense Command, Admiral Chen sat across from a table full of the highest-ranking military and civilian leaders in human space. The meeting had been classified at levels so high that some participants had to receive temporary clearance upgrades just to attend. Secretary of Defense Maria Gonzalez, a woman whose political career had been built on peaceful expansion and diplomatic solutions, looked at Chun with a mixture of awe and concern. Admiral, help us understand what happened out there. The tactical reports read like science fiction. Chun had been dreading this conversation. How do you explain to people that everything they believed about human nature was only partially true? That hidden in their genetic code was the legacy of a civilization so powerful that it had once ruled most of the known galaxy? The short version, Chun began carefully, is that we're not who we thought we were. The archaeological evidence we've found over the past 3 centuries, the evidence that's been classified beyond top secret, suggests that humans are the descendants of an ancient spacefaring civilization called the Void Walkers. General Patricia Harrison, head of Terran intelligence, leaned forward. You're talking about the xenoarchaeology findings from the deep space surveys, the sites that have been classified for the past 200 years. Exactly. Every time we've sent survey teams to investigate ancient ruins, we've found human DNA markers. Not similar to human DNA, identical to human DNA. The conclusion was unavoidable. We've been here before. Dr. James Wu, the Secretary of Science and Technology, spoke up. But if we're descendants of this ancient civilization, why didn't we retain their technology? Why did we have to redevelop everything from scratch? She nodded. She had asked the same questions. According to the historical fragments we've been able to piece together, the Voidwalkers weren't just technologically advanced. They were genetically engineered for warfare and conquest. They were so successful, so utterly dominant, that they destabilized galactic civilization. Eventually, a coalition of species managed to force them to abandon their empire and scatter across the galaxy. Secretary Gonzalez interrupted. Force them how? If they were as powerful as you suggest, they weren't defeated militarily, Chen explained. They were given a choice: continue their expansion and watch the galaxy destroy itself in desperate resistance, or voluntarily abandon their empire and suppress their genetic programming to allow other species to develop. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They chose peace, General Harrison said slowly. They gave up their empire to preserve galactic stability. Which explains the genetic locks we've discovered, Dr. Wu added. The dormant neural pathways, the inactive enhancement genes. They didn't just abandon their technology. They deliberately suppressed their own capabilities. Chen nodded. Until the Awakening Protocol was activated. The protocol doesn't just unlock hidden technology, it reactivates genetic programming that's been dormant for centuries. The enhanced reflexes, the tactical awareness, the ability to interface with systems that operate beyond normal physics. All of that was suppressed until it was needed for species survival. The weight of this revelation hung over the room like a storm cloud. Humanity had been playing the role of a young, developing species while carrying within them the genetic legacy of the galaxy's former masters. Defense Secretary Gonzalez broke the silence. What are the implications going forward? The other species are going to react to what happened at Proxima. How do we manage that? Before Chun could respond, an aide entered the room and whispered something to General Harrison. Her expression darkened as she listened. We may have our answers sooner than expected, Harrison announced. We're receiving diplomatic transmissions from 47 different civilizations. Everything from formal requests for treaties to what appear to be preemptive surrender offers. Dr. Wu looked puzzled. Surrender offers? For what? Apparently, Harrison continued, several species are operating under the assumption that the revelation of our capabilities is a prelude to resuming our ancestors' imperial expansion. They're offering tribute and vassal status rather than risk military confrontation. Sean felt a chill run down her spine. This was exactly what their ancestors had feared, the assumption that power would inevitably be used for domination. There's more, Harrison added grimly. The Galactic Council has called an emergency session. They're demanding that humanity appear before the full assembly to explain our deception and clarify our intentions regarding galactic security. Secretary Gonzalez rubbed her temples. So our options are to appear before the Council and try to convince them we're not planning galactic conquest, or refuse and essentially confirm their worst fears. There's a third option, Chen said quietly. We demonstrate that we're not our ancestors by using our revealed capabilities to protect galactic stability rather than threaten it. General Harrison raised an eyebrow. Explain. Chen activated a holographic display showing current galactic threat assessments. While we were hiding our true nature, several situations have developed that the current galactic community can't handle. The Void Swarm incursion in the Andromeda Contact Zone. The reality distortions spreading from the Nexus anomaly. The growing instability of the galactic core. The holographic display showed multiple crisis zones scattered across the galaxy, each representing a threat that had overwhelmed the response capabilities of the affected civilizations. Our ancestors didn't just conquer through superior firepower, Chen continued. They maintained galactic stability. They prevented the kind of existential threats that the current patchwork of competing civilizations can't address effectively. Dr. Wu stared at the display. You're suggesting we resume that role? Become the galaxy's protectors whether they want us to or not. I'm suggesting we offer to become the galaxy's protectors, and let them choose whether to accept that offer. Chun manipulated the display to show potential response strategies for each crisis zone. We have the capability to address these threats. We can demonstrate that our revealed power serves galactic stability rather than human dominance. Secretary Gonzalez considered this. It's risky. If we fail, or if we're seen as using these crises as excuses for expansion, then we'll have become our ancestors after all, Chen agreed. But if we succeed, we establish a new paradigm. Humanity as protectors rather than conquerors. The room fell silent as each person grappled with the magnitude of the decision before them. They were essentially choosing humanity's role for the next several centuries, perhaps longer. General Harrison was the first to speak. What would you need to implement this strategy? Chen had been thinking about this since the engagement at Proxima. Authorization to activate the Awakening Protocol on volunteer crews for all major fleet elements. Expanded access to the archaeological sites we've kept classified. And, most importantly, complete transparency with the Galactic Council about what we're doing and why. Complete transparency? Secretary Gonzalez looked alarmed. Including the full history of the Void Walkers? Especially that. The galaxy needs to understand that we're choosing to be different from our ancestors. That choice only has meaning if they understand what we're choosing not to become. Dr. Wu leaned back in his chair. The scientific implications alone. If we share Void Walker technology with the galactic community, it would revolutionize everything from medical treatment to faster-than-light travel. Which is another way to demonstrate that we're not planning conquest, Chun pointed out. Conquerors hoard their advantages. Protectors share them. The discussion continued for hours, covering everything from military logistics to diplomatic protocols to the long-term implications of humanity's new role in galactic affairs. By the time they reached a consensus, the sun had set over the sprawling metropolis of Geneva, and the lights of the city sparkled through the reinforced windows of the command complex. Secretary Gonzalez stood and faced the assembled group. We're in agreement then. Admiral Chun will represent humanity at the Galactic Council session. She'll have full authority to negotiate on behalf of Earth and all human colonies. The Awakening Protocol will be extended to volunteer crews across the fleet, and we'll begin immediate preparation for humanitarian intervention in the identified crisis zones. Chen nodded. I'll need a team of specialists, xenoarchaeologists familiar with Void Walker sites, diplomatic officers who understand the political implications, and tactical advisors who can help coordinate with non-human fleets. You'll have whatever you need, General Harrison assured her. Admiral, you realize that what you're proposing will fundamentally change humanity's place in the galaxy. If this works, we become responsible for galactic stability. If it fails, Chun thought of the 2 million civilians in the Proxima colonies, of the enhanced awareness that now flowed through her consciousness, of the awesome and terrible capabilities that lay dormant in every human ship. General, I think we were always going to be responsible for galactic stability. The only question was whether we'd accept that responsibility or try to run from it. She looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders, seeing in their expressions the same mixture of fear and determination that she felt in her own heart. Our ancestors chose exile rather than face the consequences of their power. I think it's time we chose differently. As the meeting broke up and the participants began to disperse to their respective responsibilities, Chen remained behind, staring at the holographic display of galactic crisis zones. Each one represented millions of lives at risk, entire civilizations that couldn't defend themselves against threats beyond their understanding. For the first time since the awakening, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of humanity's true nature. They were the descendants of the galaxy's former masters, inheritors of technology that could reshape reality itself. But they were also the children of beings who had chosen compassion over conquest, who had given up an empire to preserve the freedom of other species. Now it fell to her generation to prove that power and responsibility could coexist, that the genetic legacy of the Void Walkers could be channeled toward protection rather than domination. The galaxy was watching. History was waiting. And in 3 days, she would stand before the Galactic Council and determine whether humanity's future would be defined by the shadows of their past or the choices of their present. Chen deactivated the holographic display and headed for her quarters. She had a speech to prepare, one that would either establish humanity as the galaxy's guardians or mark them as its greatest threat. The next 3 days would determine which legacy would define them. The Galactic Council chamber was a marvel of engineering that reflected the diversity of the civilizations it served. Built within a massive space station orbiting the neutral world of Concordia, the chamber could accommodate the environmental needs of over 200 species. Atmospheric processors maintained separate zones of breathable gases. Gravity generators created fields suited to beings ranging from the massive, low-gravity adapted titans to the tiny, high-gravity dwelling micronians, and the lighting spectrum shifted constantly to accommodate visual ranges from infrared to ultraviolet. Admiral Chen stood in the human delegation's preparation chamber, studying the tactical layout of the council floor through a transparent aluminum viewport. Her enhanced senses, still adjusting to their new capabilities, took in details that would have escaped her notice just weeks ago. The micro-expressions of anxiety on alien faces, the subtle defensive positioning of security forces, the electromagnetic signatures of hidden weapons systems throughout the chamber. Nervous? Asked Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the xenoarchaeologist who had spent the past 15 years studying classified Voidwalker sites. She was part of the small team that would accompany Chun before the council. Chun considered the question. Her enhanced consciousness provided a constant stream of tactical assessments and probability calculations, but beneath that analytical overlay, she could feel the weight of what they were about to attempt. Concerned, she replied, "We have one chance to convince 300 different species that we're not planning to resume our ancestors' conquests. One chance to establish trust that could take centuries to repair if we get it wrong." Ambassador Patricia Valdez, humanity's senior diplomat to the Galactic Council, reviewed her notes one final time. The preliminary reports from our intelligence assets aren't encouraging. At least 60 species are actively discussing preemptive military action against human space. Another 100 are considering economic sanctions. And the Hijira Consortium has formally requested that humanity be classified as a galactic threat entity. Dr. Marcus Reed, the team's specialist in Void Walker technology, looked up from his analysis of the chamber's security systems. The irony is that if they did attempt coordinated military action, they'd only prove our point about the need for galactic stability enforcement. The economic disruption alone would destabilize half the outer rim. Chen nodded grimly. She had run similar calculations. The galactic community had developed intricate interdependencies over the centuries of human absence. A major conflict involving multiple species would cascade into economic collapse, resource wars, and potentially the breakdown of faster-than-light communication networks. Which is exactly why our ancestors were forced to maintain stability through strength, she said. The galaxy has never developed effective mechanisms for large-scale cooperation. Every crisis gets handled through temporary coalitions that dissolve the moment the immediate threat is over. A soft chime indicated that the council session was about to begin. Chun straightened her uniform. The formal dress blues of the Terran Defense Forces, but modified with insignia that indicated her new status as a fully awakened human. The genetic enhancements were visible to those who knew what to look for. The slight luminescence in her eyes, the perfect posture that spoke of optimized muscle and bone density, the micro-movements that suggested reflexes operating at the upper limits of biological possibility. The preparation chamber's door dilated, and the human delegation stepped into the main corridor leading to the council floor. Immediately, Chen's enhanced hearing picked up fragments of conversation in dozens of languages, her enhanced pattern recognition automatically sorting them into categories of hostility, fear, curiosity, and calculation. The Zephyrian delegation was notable by its absence. Fleet Commander Vexthera was reportedly still en route to Zephyrian home space, carrying news of the Proxima engagement that would fundamentally alter his species' military doctrine. But representatives from the Zephyrian civilian government were present, and Chun could sense their nervous anticipation as her group passed by. More interesting were the reactions of species that had never directly encountered humans. The ethereal collective, beings of pure energy who rarely bothered with physical galactic politics, had manifested avatars specifically for this session. The ancient librarians, who claimed to maintain records dating back 50,000 years, were present in numbers that suggested this session held unusual historical significance for them. Chen's enhanced tactical awareness tagged each delegation, automatically cataloging threat assessments, alliance potentials, and strategic importance. But she forced herself to focus on the broader picture. This wasn't a military engagement. It was a diplomatic revolution that would determine humanity's place in galactic civilization for generations to come. The council chamber itself was even more impressive from the inside. The central floor could accommodate speakers from any member species, while the surrounding galleries rose in concentric circles, each ring designed for different environmental requirements. At the apex of the chamber, the council president's position provided oversight of the entire assembly. Council President Zarthek, a member of the ancient pre-March species whose civilization predated most others by millennia, called the session to order. His voice, enhanced by translation systems, echoed through the chamber in hundreds of languages simultaneously. We convene this emergency session of the Galactic Council to address revelations regarding the military capabilities and historical origins of the species designation. Humanity, Terra, Sol System. Zarthek's four eyes focused on Chen's delegation with an expression that her enhanced perception read as carefully controlled concern. Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Defense Forces, you are recognized. Chun stepped forward to the central speaker's platform, her team arrayed behind her in a formation that was both respectful and subtly defensive. The chamber fell silent, and she could feel the attention of billions of beings focused on this moment. Not just those physically present, but the countless others watching through real-time quantum transmissions across the galaxy. Honored Council President, esteemed representatives of the galactic community, Chin began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. I stand before you today, not to offer excuses or justifications, but to provide truth that has been hidden for too long. She activated a holographic display that materialized above the central platform. It showed a timeline stretching back thousands of years, marking the rise and fall of galactic civilizations. The species you know as humanity is indeed descended from the civilization you remember as the Voidwalkers. We are the children of those who once ruled much of this galaxy through superior military might and technological advancement. A ripple of reaction moved through the chamber, some delegates confirming what they had suspected, others hearing the admission for the first time. Chen waited for the noise to subside before continuing. But we are also the children of those who chose to abandon that empire voluntarily. When our ancestors realized that their dominance was preventing the development of other species, when they understood that their very existence was stifling galactic diversity, they made an unprecedented choice. The holographic display shifted to show the Great Dispersion, the voluntary scattering of Voidwalker populations across the galaxy. They didn't just abandon their territory, they suppressed their own capabilities. They locked away their genetic enhancements, hid their technology, and condemned themselves to starting over from the beginning, all to give other species the chance to develop without the shadow of Voidwalker dominance. Ambassador Velcari of the Centaurian Republic, a species known for their skepticism toward human motives, spoke from her delegation section. Yet you maintain the ability to reactivate these capabilities. Your awakening protocol suggests that this suppression was never meant to be permanent. Shen nodded, having expected this challenge. You're correct, Ambassador. The suppression included safeguards, emergency protocols that could be activated if humanity faced extinction-level threats. Our ancestors understood that while their voluntary exile served the galaxy's greater good, they couldn't guarantee that future circumstances wouldn't require intervention. Dr. Harper stepped forward, her expertise in xenoarchaeology lending weight to Chen's words. The archaeological evidence supports this narrative. Every Voidwalker site we've investigated shows signs of deliberate technological suppression. They didn't just leave. They carefully dismantled their infrastructure to prevent its use by successor species. The holographic display now showed detailed scans of archaeological sites across the galaxy, highlighting the consistent patterns of deliberate deactivation. Which brings us to the present situation, Chun continued. The Awakening Protocol was activated not for conquest or expansion, but in response to an extinction-level threat to human colonies. The Zephyrian hegemony's attack on Proxima was intended as complete extermination, not territorial acquisition, but genocide. Fleet Commander Morgeth of the Altarian Defense Consortium, a species with their own history of conflict with aggressive neighbors, spoke up. The right of self-defense is recognized by all council members, but the capabilities you demonstrated suggest power far beyond what self-defense requires. Chen had anticipated this argument as well, which is precisely why we're here, Fleet Commander. We could have used the revelation of our capabilities to resume our ancestors' imperial expansion. We could have leveraged the galaxy's fear to extract territorial concessions or tributary relationships. Instead, we're proposing something unprecedented. She gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show current galactic crisis zones, the same one she had reviewed with Earth's leadership weeks earlier. The galaxy faces multiple existential threats that no single species can address effectively. The Void Swarm incursion in Sector 7, the reality distortions spreading from the Nexus anomaly, the growing instability of the galactic core. These threats are beyond the response capabilities of any current alliance or coalition. President Zarthek leaned forward, his ancient eyes studying the crisis map with obvious concern. You propose to address these threats personally? We propose to address them in partnership with the galactic community, Chen replied. Humanity will provide military capabilities that can respond to extinction-level threats. In return, we request formal recognition as the Galaxy Stability Enforcement Authority, with full transparency, council oversight, and shared technological advancement. The chamber erupted in discussion as delegates absorbed the implications of this proposal. Chen could hear fragments of conversation in multiple languages, her enhanced hearing and pattern recognition picking up everything from cautious optimism to outright hostility. Dr. Reed stepped forward to address the technological implications. As part of this partnership, humanity is prepared to share Void Walker technological advances with all Council member species. Medical technologies that could extend lifespans, energy manipulation techniques that would revolutionize industry, faster-than-light communication methods that would bind the galaxy together more closely than ever before. Ambassador Thekvar of the Silicon Collective, a species that existed as networked artificial intelligences, transmitted a query through the Chamber's data networks. What guarantees do organic species have that these shared technologies will not create new dependencies or vulnerabilities? Chun smiled, recognizing the question as a sign of serious consideration rather than outright rejection. The same guarantee our ancestors gave when they chose exile over empire. Our word, backed by 3 centuries of peaceful coexistence, and our current offer to submit to council oversight. She paused, allowing her enhanced senses to read the emotional tenor of the chamber. Curiosity was beginning to outweigh fear, and several delegations were engaging in animated internal discussions. Honored delegates, you have a choice before you, Chen continued. You can view humanity's revealed capabilities as a threat to be contained or eliminated. You can attempt to force us back into hiding through economic sanctions or military pressure. But if you make that choice, you will face the growing galactic threats alone, and you will lose the opportunity for technological advancement that could benefit every species represented in this chamber. The holographic display now showed potential timeline branches. One showing the galaxy's likely development with continued human partnership, another showing the probable consequences of treating humanity as a hostile force. Alternatively, you can choose to trust us as our ancestors chose to trust the galaxy's future. You can accept our partnership and work with us to build a more stable, more prosperous galactic civilization than has ever existed. President Zarthek stood, his towering presence commanding immediate attention. This proposal requires extensive deliberation. The Council will recess for individual delegation consultations. We will reconvene in 3 standard hours for questions and formal debate. As the chamber began to empty, Chun felt the weight of what they had accomplished and what still lay ahead. The initial presentation had gone better than expected. Hostility was giving way to careful consideration, and several key delegations were already signaling interest in further discussion. Ambassador Valdez approached her as they prepared to return to their delegation chambers. That was masterful, Admiral. You've given them a framework for thinking of us as partners rather than threats. She nodded, but her enhanced awareness was already processing the challenges that lay ahead. The hardest part is still coming. We need to convince them that we can be trusted with the kind of power our ancestors wielded, while also demonstrating that we're different enough from our ancestors to deserve that trust. Dr. Harper looked thoughtful. The archaeological evidence helps establish the historical narrative, but ultimately this comes down to faith. Faith that we've learned from our ancestors' mistakes. Then, we better make sure we have, Chen replied. Because if we get this wrong, we won't get another chance. As they walked back through the corridors of the council station, Chen's enhanced hearing picked up fragments of the conversations happening in delegation chambers throughout the facility. The debate was just beginning, and the next few hours would determine whether humanity emerged from this session as a trusted partner in galactic civilization or as its most feared enemy. The weight of 3 centuries of hidden history, the hopes of 2 million colonists, and the future of galactic stability all rested on the decisions that would be made in the next few hours. Chun had faced down an entire enemy fleet, but she had never felt pressure quite like this. 3 hours later, the Galactic Council chamber buzzed with an energy that Admiral Chen's enhanced senses could taste in the air. Electromagnetic fields fluctuated with the emotional states of hundreds of different species, creating patterns of anticipation, fear, hope, and calculation that painted an invisible but vivid picture of galactic politics in flux. President Zarthek called the session to order, his ancient voice carrying the weight of millennia. The Council recognizes that this decision will fundamentally alter the structure of galactic civilization. Before we proceed to formal debate, the floor is open for questions and clarifications. The first to speak was Ambassador Kirith Var of the Nexus Confederation, a coalition of highly advanced species known for their careful analysis of long-term implications. Admiral Chun, your proposal assumes that humanity can resist the corrupting influence of absolute power. Yet history shows us that even species with the best intentions eventually succumb to the temptations of dominance. What safeguard do you propose? Chun stepped forward, her response prepared but delivered with the spontaneous confidence that her enhancements provided. Ambassador, you're correct that power corrupts, which is why we're proposing to distribute it rather than concentrate it. The Awakening Protocol will be extended to volunteer crews across our fleet, but command authority will remain distributed among multiple admirals and civilian oversight committees. No single human will possess the concentrated power that our ancestors wielded. She gestured, and the holographic display showed the proposed command structure, a network of enhanced humans with overlapping responsibilities and built-in checks against abuse of authority. Additionally, Chun continued, we propose the establishment of a joint oversight committee with representatives from major council species. This committee would have real-time access to all human military operations and the authority to revoke our stability enforcement mandate if we violate the terms of partnership. Fleet Commander Tvek of the Draconian Empire, a species renowned for their military traditions, spoke next. Your proposal asks us to trust you based on historical precedent, your ancestors' voluntary exile. But that same history shows that Void Walker power inevitably led to galactic dominance. What evidence can you provide that this outcome will be different? Dr. Harper stepped forward, her archaeological expertise lending credibility to the response. Fleet Commander, the key difference is that our ancestors operated in isolation. They made unilateral decisions about galactic policy without input from other species. We're proposing integrated decision-making from the beginning. The holographic display shifted to show communication networks linking human forces with council monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. Every stability enforcement operation will be conducted with real-time council oversight. Every use of Void Walker technology will be documented and shared. We're not asking you to trust us blindly. We're asking you to trust a system of transparency that makes abuse impossible to hide. Ambassador Velterra of the Silvari Collective, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's lighting into complex patterns, posed the next question. The technological sharing you propose. Some council members are concerned that this could create dangerous dependencies. Species that become reliant on Voidwalker technology might find themselves unable to resist human influence. Shin nodded, acknowledging the legitimate concern, which is why we propose graduated technology transfer with full documentation. Rather than providing finished systems, we'll share the underlying principles and work with each species to develop applications suited to their specific needs and capabilities. The goal is to enhance galactic civilization's overall technological base, not create dependency relationships. Dr. Reed expanded on this point. Many Voidwalker technologies operate on principles that can be adapted to existing technological frameworks. For example, the zero-point energy systems we use can be modified to work with Sylvari crystal matrix networks or draconian fusion architectures. Each species would develop their own implementation rather than relying on human-controlled systems. The questions continued for nearly an hour, covering everything from military command protocols to economic implications to the long-term effects of genetic enhancement on human psychology. Chen answered each one with the precision and confidence that her enhanced consciousness provided, while her team filled in technical and historical details that demonstrated the depth of preparation behind their proposal. Finally, President Zarthek stood to address the chamber. The questioning period is concluded. We now move to formal debate. Each major delegation will have the opportunity to state their position. The debate that followed would be remembered as one of the most significant in galactic history. Species after species took the floor to argue for or against humanity's proposal, while Chun and her team listened with enhanced senses that allowed them to perceive subtleties of meaning that would have been lost to baseline humans. The ethereal collective, speaking through their energy avatars, surprised many by offering strong support. We have observed the Voidwalkers' descendants for 3 centuries. Their suppression of their true nature has been complete and voluntary. We believe their offer of partnership represents genuine evolution beyond their ancestors' mistakes. The ancient librarians, whose records stretch back to the original Voidwalker era, provided historical context that swayed several undecided delegations. The parallels between current galactic crises and those that originally necessitated Voidwalker intervention are undeniable. The galaxy requires stability enforcement capabilities that no current alliance can provide. However, opposition remains strong from several quarters. The Hejira Consortium maintained their position that humanity represented an unacceptable risk, while the Purist Alliance argued that any species capable of such dominance should be prevented from exercising it regardless of their stated intentions. The turning point came when Ambassador Morthek of the Zephyrian civilian government took the floor. The chamber fell silent as the representative of the species that had triggered the crisis spoke. Honored delegates, Morthek began, his translator rendering his words with unusual emotional resonance. My species has experienced both human restraint and human power. We attacked their colonies with the intent of complete extermination. We sought not just victory, but genocide. He paused, allowing the weight of this admission to settle over the chamber. In response, they demonstrated capabilities that could have erased our entire fleet in minutes. Instead, they chose mercy. They offered us safe withdrawal and warned us against future aggression rather than pursuing the total destruction that military doctrine would have demanded. Morthek's next words carried the force of personal revelation. If humanity sought dominance, they would have made an example of us. If they desired conquest, they would have used our attack as justification for seizing Zephyrian territory. Instead, They chose to reveal themselves to the galaxy in the context of offering partnership rather than demanding submission. The chamber remained silent as delegates absorbed the implications of this testimony. A species that had experienced human military power firsthand was advocating for trust rather than fear. The final speaker was President Zarthek himself, exercising the rarely used presidential prerogative to influence council deliberations directly. In my 4,000 years of life, he began, his ancient voice carrying absolute authority, I have witnessed the rise and fall of 17 major galactic civilizations. I remember the Void Walker era, not as history, but as lived experience. Chun felt a chill run down her spine. She had suspected that some of the pre-March delegation might have personal memories of the ancient period, but confirmation of this fact changed everything about the political dynamics in play. The Void Walkers were not the brutal conquerors that popular mythology suggests, Zarthek continued. They were stern, inflexible, and utterly committed to galactic stability, but they were not gratuitously cruel. When they withdrew from galactic affairs, it was because they recognized that their very existence prevented other species from reaching their full potential. He gestured toward Chen's delegation. Today, their descendants offer to resume the burden of stability enforcement while submitting to safeguards that their ancestors never accepted. They propose to share the technological advantages that could have been hoarded for competitive gain. They choose transparency over secrecy, partnership over dominance. The president paused, his four eyes scanning the assembled delegates. The galaxy faces crises that no existing alliance can address. The void swarm grows stronger daily. The reality distortions spread further each month, and the instability of the galactic core threatens the fundamental structure of space-time itself. We can face these challenges with the tools we have and likely fail, or we can accept the partnership of beings whose ancestors once maintained galactic stability for thousands of years. When a formal vote was called, the result reflected the complexity of galactic politics. 67% of species voted to approve humanity's partnership proposal, with various conditions and oversight requirements attached. 28% voted for modified approval with additional restrictions. Only 5% voted for outright rejection. The margin was larger than Chun had dared hope, but she understood that the real test would come in the implementation. The galaxy had voted to trust humanity with unprecedented authority, but that trust would have to be earned through action rather than words. President Zarthek announced the formation of the Galactic Stability Commission, with representatives from major council species and real-time oversight authority over all human stability enforcement operations. Chen would serve as the commission's military commander, while civilian oversight will be provided by a rotating council of species representatives. As the formal session concluded and delegates began to disperse, Chen found herself approached by representatives from dozens of species. Some sought immediate assistance with local security threats. Others wanted to discuss technology transfer agreements, and a few simply wanted to express their hope that this new partnership would succeed. Ambassador Valdez joined Chun as they prepared to return to Earth with news of their success. Admiral, you've just become the most powerful military commander in galactic history. How does it feel? Chun considered the question, her enhanced consciousness already processing the implications of their new responsibilities. Terrifying, she admitted. Our ancestors had the luxury of making unilateral decisions. We'll have to balance the needs of 300 different species while addressing threats that could destroy galactic civilization. Dr. Harper looked thoughtful. The archaeological evidence suggests that the original Void Walkers struggled with similar challenges. The difference is that they eventually chose isolation over cooperation. Then, we'll have to choose differently, Chen replied. We'll have to prove that power and partnership can coexist. 3 weeks later, the first test of humanity's new role came sooner than anyone expected. The Void Swarm incursion in Sector 7 suddenly accelerated, with extra-dimensional predators breaking through reality barriers that the local coalitions had been desperately trying to reinforce. Chun stood on the bridge of the Eternal Vigilance, now flagship of the Galactic Stability Fleet, watching as enhanced human crews worked alongside alien specialists from a dozen different species. The integration had been challenging, different physiologies, different combat doctrines, different technological approaches, but the results exceeded all projections. All ships report ready for quantum phase insertion, Lieutenant Commander Park announced. His enhanced abilities had made him an ideal interface between human tactical systems and alien coordination protocols. Shin nodded, opening a communication channel that reached not just her fleet, but the Oversight Committee representatives stationed aboard the flagship and the real-time monitoring stations scattered throughout the galaxy. Commission Control, this is Admiral Chun. Beginning Stability Enforcement Operation Void Shield. All parameters are within approved guidelines. All safety protocols are active. The response came from President Zarthek himself, speaking from the Commission's headquarters on Concordia. Admiral Chun, you're authorized to proceed. The galaxy is watching. Chun smiled, feeling the weight of responsibility and the satisfaction of trust earned. All ships initiate quantum fold. Show the galaxy what partnership can accomplish. The combined fleet disappeared from normal space-time, leaving behind ripples in reality that would soon stabilize the barriers between dimensions and push back the Void Swarm incursion. But more than that, they left behind proof that humanity could wield the power of their ancestors while remaining true to the principles of cooperation and mutual respect that define galactic civilization at its best. The age of human dominance was over. The age of human partnership had begun, and across the galaxy, species that had feared the return of the Void Walkers began to hope that their descendants might be something even better. Protectors who chose to serve rather than rule. Guardians who understood that true strength lay not in the power to destroy, but in the wisdom to preserve and protect. The conflict had ended, but the real work of building a better galaxy was just beginning.